The room went so quiet that Ava could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. 42 people sat around the glass conference table on the 23rd floor of the Mercer and Vale headquarters, every one of them staring at the same thing, the folder in Harper's hands. Harper lifted the pages like they were evidence from a crime scene. "I need everyone to stop for a second," she said, her voice trembling in that perfect, practiced way that made people lean in. "Because what Ava Monroe is about to present to you isn't her work. It's mine." A ripple went through the room. Across the table, the company's chief executive slowly lowered his pen. Two investors exchanged a look. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God." Ava didn't move. She sat straight-backed in her charcoal suit, one hand resting lightly on the edge of her laptop, the other around a pen she had no intention of using. She looked at Harper the way a person looks at a storm they knew was coming 3 days before the first drop of rain. Harper's eyes were bright with fury and nerves. She was Ava's cousin, 4 months younger. Same sharp jawline, same dark hair, same family nose their aunt used to joke, came from the women on our side. But where Ava had learned to keep her face still, Harper had always worn her feelings like a weapon. Jealousy, especially, sat on her shoulders like expensive perfume. "I have the original concept drafts," Harper continued, turning to the room. "The timelines, the email trail, and I have texts proving she used my research, my contacts, and my design notes." A low murmur spread through the boardroom. The project in question was worth $80 million, maybe more. A flagship residential tower on the lakefront, the kind of development that could make a career or destroy one. Ava had spent 14 months on it. Sleepless nights, emergency revisions, client meetings that ran past midnight. 100 ugly compromises and one stunning final version that everyone in this room had been waiting to see. And now Harper was trying to steal it from under her. Ava glanced toward the CEO, then back to her cousin. "Are you finished?" she asked calmly. Harper blinked, thrown off balance by the softness of Ava's voice. She had expected panic, maybe anger, tears even. Anything but this steady, almost bored composure. "You're not even going to deny it?" Harper snapped. Ava smiled just enough to unsettle her. "No, I'm going to let you finish embarrassing yourself." The room gasped, softly but audibly. Harper's face flushed. "You think you can talk your way out of this?" "No," Ava said. "I think you already talked your way into a trap." No one understood what she meant yet. Not the investors, not the executives, not Harper, who stood there gripping the pages as if they could still save her. But Ava had been waiting for this exact moment for 3 weeks. She had known Harper would come for her. She had known Harper couldn't resist taking the bait. And she had known the truth would only matter if it came out in front of witnesses she couldn't charm afterward. So she stood up, smooth and unhurried, and clicked her remote. The giant screen behind her went black. Then a file opened. Harper's face changed first. Not panic, recognition. Ava saw it happen, the tiny crack in the armor. Because the document on the screen was not the final tower design. It was the decoy. And the second Harper stole it, she had already lost. 2 weeks earlier, Ava had been standing in her grandmother's old kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, with a stack of unpaid utility bills in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood, the way it always had when her grandmother, Ruth Monroe, was alive. The wallpaper in the hallway was still the faded yellow. Ruth had insisted was warm, not tired. The dent in the doorframe where Ava had once slammed a backpack too hard at 15 was still there. Ruth had left the house to Ava in her will. Not because Ava wanted it. She had tried to refuse it at first, but Ruth had been stubborn even in her last year, her voice thin from illness and her grip still iron. "This house is not a burden," she had told Ava one evening, tucked into the recliner with a knitted blanket over her knees. "It is proof that somebody in this family can keep something standing." At the time, Ava had laughed through tears and kissed her forehead. Ruth had been the one person who never made Ava feel like her success was a threat. Ava had built her career in Chicago, working her way up from junior designer to lead project strategist at Mercer and Vale, one of the biggest urban development firms in the Midwest. She was the woman clients asked for by name when they wanted a project done cleanly, beautifully, and on deadline. She knew zoning laws, structural compromises, and how to calm a furious investor while 2 city permits were still pending. She also knew how to smile when people underestimated her. Harper knew all of that too. That was the problem. When they were younger, the 2 cousins had been inseparable. They spent summers in Ruth's backyard, chasing fireflies, sharing popsicles, and whispering secrets under the oak tree, like the world could not possibly touch them. Ava had helped Harper study for algebra. Harper had defended Ava once in middle school when a boy called her the teacher's pet. But adulthood had changed everything. Ava had gotten the scholarships, then the internships, then the promotions. Harper had bounced between jobs, then married a guy who looked polished in photos and cruel in private, then divorced him after 3 years when she found out he had emptied their joint account. She had called the family and cried into the phone and accepted money from Ruth for rent more times than anyone admitted out loud. At first, Ava had pitied her. Then she had tried to help. Then she had realized help had become an insult. Every compliment Ava received seemed to land on Harper like an accusation. Every achievement became, in Harper's eyes, evidence that someone else had cheated her. It was never enough that Ava succeeded. Ava had to be the reason Harper failed. The worst part was how quietly Harper had begun to poison the air around her. It started with little things. A client remarked that Ava was too aggressive during a presentation. An HR rumor that she was difficult to work with. A family dinner where Harper casually asked if Ava's promotion had anything to do with the firm's CEO being fond of ambitious women. A text from Ava's aunt saying, "I hope you're not overworking yourself into one of those office affairs people talk about." Ava had stared at that text for a long time before replying. No matter how many times she denied it, the story kept growing teeth. Then one day she walked into the office and found a draft of her tower concept printed out in the copier tray, marked up with notes that were not hers. The file name had been changed. The version history looked clean enough to pass casual inspection, but someone had been inside her work. She checked her cloud access logs. Harper had accessed the folder. Ava had not confronted her. Not yet. Instead, she had made a decision that changed everything. She invited Harper to dinner. Not at a restaurant, not somewhere public. At Ruth's house, under the pretense of going through old things before the property was listed for sale. Harper arrived in heels too sharp for the cracked driveway and a coat that looked expensive enough to be borrowed, if not paid for. She kissed Ava's cheek, then looked around the house with the exact expression of someone remembering they expected more. "Still smells like this place never grew up," Harper said, setting down her purse. Ava kept her face neutral. "It's a house, not a campaign office." Harper laughed too loudly. "You're in a mood." Ava opened the refrigerator and pulled out lemonade. "You've been saying people at work think I'm stealing ideas." Harper's hand paused in the act of taking off her coat. "I didn't say that. You suggested it." Harper sighed, as if the burden of Ava's accuracy was exhausting. "Ava, I'm just telling you what I hear." "From who?" "People. Name one." Harper tossed her hair back. "Why are you interrogating me?" "Because my project at work was leaked, and your access shows up in the folder." Harper's mouth tightened for half a second. Then she laughed. "Are you serious right now? You really think I have time to steal your little office drawings?" Ava set the lemonade on the table. "Little office drawings make people millions of dollars." Now Harper's eyes flashed. "There it is. That's always been your problem. You act like you're above everybody, like being successful means you get to talk down to the rest of us." Ava studied her quietly. "This isn't about success. This is about you taking what isn't yours." Harper stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Maybe you should ask yourself why everyone believes me faster than they believe you." Ava didn't answer, because she already knew the answer. Harper had spent months building a story where Ava was the selfish one, the polished one, the one who had forgotten where she came from. To the family, she was the cousin who had made it. To Harper, that meant Ava must have cheated somebody. And now Harper was in Ruth's kitchen pretending she hadn't crossed the line. So Ava made a choice. She stopped arguing. She stopped defending herself. She started letting Harper talk. People tell on themselves when they think they are winning. Ava learned this from years in boardrooms and court-adjacent design meetings, where the people who laughed the loudest were usually the ones hiding the most. She let Harper keep talking that night until the cousin was practically bragging. Not directly. Never directly. Harper was careful enough for that. But she talked around the details of what she knew. How she had heard things. How certain people at Mercer and Vale were unimpressed with Ava's attitude. How someone should probably be managing the lakefront project if the company really cared about relationships, not just talent. Then she made one mistake. She asked Ava, in a voice sweet enough to rot teeth, whether the final tower pitch was done. Ava looked up from the dish towel in her hand. Why? Harper shrugged. Just curious. Ava smiled. That's funny. I was just about to ask you the same thing. Harper frowned. Ask me what? Whether you've decided who you're going to sell my work to. The silence that followed was so sharp it almost had a sound of its own. Harper's face went blank for 1 second. 1 tiny second. Then she recovered. I don't know what you think you know. Ava stepped closer, soft and calm. I know enough. That was when Harper backed away, the first real sign of fear. Ava could have confronted her right there. She could have shoved the folder across the table, played the access logs, forced a confession in the kitchen where Ruth had once baked peach cobbler every August. But if she did it then, Harper would deny everything, cry to the family, and turn the whole thing into a war of accusations. Ava wanted more than truth. She wanted proof that could survive people's excuses. So she kept quiet and built the trap. She did it the way she did everything else, methodically, with patience. First, she moved the real tower plans into a secured system with limited access and built a decoy folder that looked exactly like the original. Same naming conventions, same file structure, same revision notes. The only difference was in the details. The decoy included a few subtle but fatal flaws harmless to the firm's servers, obvious to any expert who opened the file carefully. It also contained a hidden digital watermark that would identify the copy if anyone forwarded it or printed it through the wrong channel. Then she told only one person at work that she had taken her eyes off the project and was having trouble keeping family matters from distracting her. That person, unfortunately for Harper, was her own assistant's boyfriend, who had a tendency to repeat things over drinks and no idea he was being used as a leak. Next, Ava called the family lawyer about Ruth's estate. That call became the second part of the trap. Ruth's will had already been settled months earlier, but there was an addendum the lawyer had never read aloud at the first meeting because it was sealed and marked to be opened only if a dispute arose. Ruth, apparently, had expected trouble. In the addendum, Ruth laid out exactly why Ava had inherited the house. It wasn't sentiment. Not entirely. Ava had paid Ruth's property taxes for 3 years when Ruth's pension got cut. Ava had covered 2 home repairs, a heating issue, and the final hospital bills Ruth's insurance didn't fully handle. Harper had visited often enough to post pictures online and talk beautifully about family duty, but she had never once signed a check when it mattered. The addendum also contained a quiet but devastating clause. If any beneficiary attempted to forge evidence, spread defamatory claims, or manipulate the estate through falsehood, that beneficiary would not only lose any discretionary share, but would also be named in a sealed statement to be delivered to the family at the reading. Ruth had not just planned for a fight. She had planned for Harper. Ava didn't tell anyone that part yet. She waited. That was the hardest part. Waiting while Harper got louder. At the office, Harper escalated first. She began sending carefully worded emails to Ava's manager, implying that Ava had become unreliable. She mentioned the family connection as if it explained everything. She suggested there were concerns about propriety in how Ava had secured the contract. One day, Ava came back from a meeting to find Harper standing outside her office talking to the finance director, smiling in that frightened little cousin way that made people underestimate how dangerous she was. Ava watched from the hallway. The finance director left looking troubled. Harper spotted Ava and lifted her chin. You might want to clean up whatever mess you made. Ava walked past her without a word. Harper hated that almost as much as being ignored. Then came the rumor that finally reached everyone. Someone in the office whispered that Ava had slept her way into the firm's confidence. Another version said she had used family money to buy her position. By Friday, there was a story going around the elevators that Harper, not Ava, had actually drawn the tower concept first and had been bullied out of the presentation by a more experienced cousin who knew how to manipulate people. Ava heard all of it. She did not react. That made the rumor grow faster. At family dinners, Aunt Lorraine started looking at Ava with pity mixed with suspicion. Uncle David, who loved peace more than truth, stopped asking direct questions and started saying things like, "Maybe both of you just need some space." Space, as if betrayal could be solved by distance. Harper performed innocence beautifully. "I just don't want this to split the family," she told Ruth's sister over Sunday lunch. "Ava's always been intense. You know how she gets." Ava smiled into her iced tea. "I know exactly how I get," she said. "I get receipts." Harper laughed, but not comfortably. By the time the board presentation arrived, Harper believed she had already won. That was when Ava invited her to the lakefront office for an informal review of the final pitch. She sent the invitation through the company's system and copied the legal team, the chief operating officer, and the firm's ethics officer. Harper, who could not resist an audience when she thought she was going to be admired, accepted immediately. She arrived wearing cream and confidence. Ava met her in conference room C with no expression at all. The screen behind Ava showed only the project name, Harbor Point Residences. Harper sat down across from her and looked smug enough to be dangerous. "I hope this doesn't take long. I'm actually meeting someone." "Who?" Ava asked. Harper smiled. "You'll find out." Ava opened a folder on her tablet. "I want to ask you something first." Harper waved a hand. "Go ahead. Do you know what metadata is?" Harper frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." Harper leaned back. "Of course I know what metadata is." "Good," Ava said. "Then you also know why people who steal work usually don't notice when they're stealing the wrong version." The color drained from Harper's face. Ava turned the tablet around. On the screen was the decoy file. Not the final design. The fake one. The one Harper had copied, printed, and forwarded to a contact she thought was a potential buyer from another firm. Attached were timestamps, access logs, and a full record of every person who had opened the file. Harper's name was there. So was the account she had forwarded it to. So were her edits. Harper tried to recover instantly. "That doesn't prove anything." "You could have planted that." Ava nodded as if she expected that response. "I did plant it." Harper blinked. Ava continued, still calm. "I planted a version of my work with deliberate errors only someone rushing to copy it would miss. And I planted a watermark that traces the exact device used to print and forward it." Harper's voice sharpened. "You're lying." "No," Ava said. "I'm documenting." The ethics officer, who had quietly entered the room 15 seconds earlier with the COO, closed the door behind him. Harper hadn't noticed them until that moment. She went pale. Ava looked at her cousin with a sadness so controlled it almost seemed colder than anger. "I was going to let this stop at the office," Ava said. "But then you brought Ruth into it." Harper's mouth opened, then shut. Ava slid a second folder across the table. Inside were copies of the messages Harper had sent to family members, insinuating that Ava had manipulated Ruth's will. There were screenshots of Harper's texts to a former college friend, saying she planned to get Ava exposed before she gets any more family money. There was the audio file from Ruth's kitchen, recorded the night Harper bragged about having the final draft, and asked whether Ava had finished her little pitch. Harper stared at the papers. Her hands began to shake. "You recorded me?" Ava's voice never rose. "You recorded yourself. I just gave the truth a place to live." Harper stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You set me up." "Yes," Ava said. Harper's face twisted. "You knew I was trying to help myself and you set me up like I'm some criminal?" Ava gave a short, humorless laugh. "You forged access, spread lies, tried to steal a project worth millions, and then you used our dead grandmother to do it. What part of that sounds like help to you?" Harper looked around wildly, as if waiting for someone to rescue her. No one came. That was because someone else had entered the room behind her without her hearing. The family lawyer. He held a thick envelope in one hand and a pale expression on his face. Ava, he said quietly, I think now is the right time. Harper turned slowly, and whatever fight remained in her collapsed at the sight of him. The lawyer placed the envelope on the table and looked at everyone in the room before speaking. Your grandmother left instructions that this packet be opened if there was any dispute involving the estate or allegations of fraud. Harper's lips parted. Ava sat down, not because she was weak, but because she knew this would land harder if she didn't stand over it like a judge. The lawyer opened the envelope. Ruth's handwriting appeared on the first page in ink blue enough to feel alive. He read it aloud. It was not a dramatic speech. It was better than that. It was Ruth, plain and sharp and loving as ever, saying that she had watched too many women in her family twist themselves into smaller people to make jealous relatives comfortable. She wrote that Ava had never asked for more than her share, while Harper had always acted as if the world owed her a prize for surviving her own choices. She said she had no patience for tears without honesty. She said family love was not measured by noise. It was measured by what a person did when nobody was watching. Harper made a tiny, broken sound. The lawyer kept reading. Ruth had also written that if any beneficiary attempted fraud or defamation connected to the estate would take that as proof of character. Any discretionary inheritance would instead be redirected to a scholarship fund for women studying architecture and urban planning, fields Ruth had followed proudly in Ava's career. Harper looked as if someone had struck her. You can't be serious, she whispered. The lawyer met her eyes. I am. Harper spun toward Ava. You let me walk into this? Ava's gaze didn't move. You walked yourself. Harper's voice rose, sharp and desperate now. You've been waiting for this. You've been smiling in my face the whole time. Yes, Ava said. Because the moment I showed anger, you would have turned it into proof that you were the victim. Harper laughed once, a wild, ugly sound. You think this makes you better than me? No, Ava said. I think it makes me tired. That cut deeper than yelling would have. Harper stared at her with hatred and hurt tangled together so tightly they were almost the same thing. You always had to win, she said, and for the first time there was something raw in her voice. You got the praise, the opportunities, the house, the respect. You got everything. I was the one who had to watch. Ava's expression softened, not because she agreed, but because she recognized the wound underneath the poison. Harper, she said quietly, I offered you help, a job referral, legal advice after your divorce, money when you said you couldn't pay your electric bill, you didn't want help. You wanted my life. Harper's eyes filled, then hardened again. Maybe I deserved it. The sentence hung there. Ava said nothing for a long moment. Then, no, you deserved better than whatever made you think destroying me would fix you. That was the first time Harper looked genuinely afraid. Not of being caught, but of being seen. The ethics officer cleared his throat. We'll need to continue this with legal and HR present. Harper jerked back as if those 3 letters had slapped her. The COO spoke next, his voice measured and cold. Your access to the project is revoked effective immediately. You'll need to surrender your badge. Harper looked at him in disbelief. You're firing me? I'm not making a statement yet, he said. But yes, you are being removed from the building. 2 security officers arrived quietly at the door. Harper's face went white. For a second, she looked younger than she had all night. Younger than her fury. Younger than her lies. Just a frightened woman in a pretty blouse realizing the room was no longer hers to control. She turned one last time toward Ava, and her voice cracked. Was any of it real? Ever? Ava thought of fireflies and lemonade on Ruth's porch, and the girl Harper had once been before envy taught her how to bite. Then she said, the family was real. You chose to break it. Harper's eyes spilled over. She swallowed hard, grabbed her purse with shaking hands, and walked out between the guards without another word. The office was silent for a full 10 seconds after the door closed. Then the lawyer gently set the final page of Ruth's letter in front of Ava. There was one last line in the handwriting she knew better than her own. For my girl who never needed to lie to stand tall, keep going. Let the truth do the heavy lifting. Ava bowed her head. She had not cried when Harper accused her. She had not cried when the board stared, when the lawyer read the letter, or when security escorted her cousin out. But Ruth's words were a key, turning in a lock she had kept closed for too long. A single tear hit the paper, then another. By the time she looked up, the COO had already begun making phone calls. The ethics officer was collecting evidence. The legal team was asking for every email Harper had sent. One investor, who had remained strangely quiet through the entire ordeal, stood and said, with visible disgust, that the firm did not tolerate theft or defamation dressed up as family drama. Ava let it all happen around her like weather, because at last, the storm had hit the right house. The fallout was fast. Harper's access was cut off before she could delete anything else. The rival contact she had tried to leak the files to backed away the moment they realized the documents were marked. Her attempt to claim authorship collapsed in less than a day. The project moved forward under Ava's name, with the board publicly praising her discipline under pressure, which was corporate language for she survived an ambush and made it look effortless. At home, the family split open. Aunt Lorraine called Ava crying at 3 a.m. "I didn't know," she kept saying. "I swear I didn't know she was going that far." "You knew she was saying things," Ava replied softly. "I thought it was just jealousy. That is how it starts." Lorraine cried harder. Uncle David, who had stayed quiet through too much, finally admitted on a video call that Harper had asked him to influence the reading of Ruth's will. He had refused, but he had also not told anyone because he didn't want to make a scene. Ava stared at him through the screen and felt something inside her settle into a colder shape. "That's what people say right before the damage becomes permanent," she told him. He had no answer. 3 weeks later, the formal estate meeting happened in Ruth's dining room. The same room where birthdays had been celebrated under paper streamers, where too many holiday arguments had been reduced to passive-aggressive potato salad jokes, where Ava had once cried as a kid because she was too afraid to read aloud in front of family. This time, she sat at the head of the table, not because she demanded it, because the chair was hers. The lawyer read the estate accounting, the addendum, and the final instructions. There was no room left for interpretation. No loophole, no dramatic plea, no family myth strong enough to survive a ledger and a signature. Harper did not attend. Her lawyer had advised her not to. Her mother did, though. Ava's aunt wore black and looked older than she had a month earlier. She sat rigidly, hands folded, eyes red, and listened as the lawyer explained exactly how Ruth had anticipated the dispute and how Harper's actions had affected her standing. When it was over, the aunt turned to Ava with a face twisted by grief and shame. "I should have stopped her," she whispered. Ava looked at her a long moment. Maybe she should have. Maybe everybody should have stopped her. But stopping someone becomes harder each time you tell yourself it is not your place. "I know," Ava said finally. "But she is not a child." The aunt nodded, crying silently now. "Is there any chance she can fix this?" Ava thought of Harper's face in the boardroom, her voice on the recording, the smug look when she believed she had cornered her, the hunger beneath all of it. "Fixing this starts with telling the truth," Ava said. For once, the aunt closed her eyes. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer handed Ava one final envelope containing the deed to the house and Ruth's personal note about what to do with it. Ava opened it later that night in the kitchen, alone, while rain tapped softly against the windows. Ruth had written, in slanting, careful letters, "Do not let bitterness turn this house into a monument to what was lost. Let it become a place where someone younger than you gets to start without being humiliated." Ava read it twice. Then she sat down at Ruth's old table and cried in a way she had not let herself cry in months. Not because she had lost, because she had finally won in the only way that mattered, and it still hurt. Harper's consequences kept coming. She was fired from the firm after the internal investigation confirmed the theft and the false statements to management. The rival company, unwilling to be pulled into a legal mess, cut contact immediately. Her divorce settlement had already left her financially brittle, and the job loss pushed her past the point where appearance could cover reality. The family that used to gather around her jokes now answered her calls less and less. People did not stop loving her all at once. That would have been too simple. They just stopped making excuses for her. That was the real humiliation. No dramatic arrest, no screaming match in the street. Just the slow collapse of every lie that had been feeding her pride. And then, months later, something unexpected happened. Ava was in Ruth's house, clearing out the attic for renovation, when she found another envelope tucked behind a box of Christmas ornaments. Her name was on it. The handwriting was not Ruth's. It was Harper's. Inside was a letter, not a text, not a social media apology, a real letter written on lined paper with shaky ink and too much pressure in the pen. Ava read it, standing up, one hand on the attic railing, the summer heat crawling through the roof. Harper did not ask for forgiveness. That was the first thing Ava noticed. She said she had been living with the kind of anger that made every success feel like theft. She admitted she had lied because it was easier than admitting how lost she felt after her divorce, after the layoffs, after realizing the life she imagined for herself had never existed. She wrote that Ava's calm had made her feel invisible, and that she hated her for it because calm looked like a life Harper could not break. Then she wrote the line that mattered. I know I tried to ruin you because I thought your life made mine look small. Ava closed her eyes. The letter ended with a confession that Harper had been in therapy for 6 weeks and that the therapist had told her shame turns people cruel when they refuse to face it. She said she was not asking to be welcomed back, only that Ava knows she had finally stopped lying to herself. Ava sat down on the attic floor and held the paper in both hands. For a long time she did not know what she felt. Not forgiveness exactly. Not peace either. Something more complicated. The absence of the need to keep carrying anger just to prove she had been wronged. She put the letter back in the envelope. Then she did something Harper probably never expected. She called her. Harper answered on the 4th ring. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, Harper said, in a voice stripped of its old polish, I didn't think you'd call. Ava looked out the attic window at the neighborhood below, where children were riding bikes in the street and someone's dog was barking at a mailbox. I'm not calling to restart the past, she said. I'm calling because you were honest for once. Harper swallowed hard. That letter was real. I know. A long pause. Then, very quietly, do you hate me? Ava thought about that for a while. No, she said at last. But I don't trust you. Harper let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. That's fair, she whispered. Ava stared at the old rafters above her. The beams her grandmother had once said were stronger than they looked. Get better, Ava said. Not for me. For the person you should have been. Harper cried then, and Ava heard it even through the phone. When the call ended, Ava sat for a while in the quiet attic and listened to the house breathe around her. She thought about all the people who had called her cold during the worst of it. How little they understood that calm is sometimes just pain trained to stand still. She thought about how envy can take root in a family and grow teeth if nobody names it. She thought about Ruth, who had seen the whole mess coming and left behind not just a house, but a warning wrapped in love. The next week, Ava signed the papers to turn Ruth's house into a small design mentorship space for young women from her neighborhood. The first room became a studio. The second became a meeting room. Ruth's kitchen stayed almost exactly the same, down to the yellow wallpaper and the crooked wall clock. Ava kept the old dining table because stories, she had learned, mattered when they were worth preserving. At the opening event, a dozen young women sat around that table with notebooks in their laps, listening to Ava explain how one idea can become a building, how one building can become a neighborhood, and how no one gets to steal your future just because they are angry that yours is growing faster than theirs. She never mentioned Harper by name. She didn't need to. Karma had already done the loud part. Harper lost the respect she had tried to borrow, the career she tried to falsify, and the illusion that cruelty could protect her from her own insecurity. Ava lost peace for a while, but she kept something far more valuable. Her name, her work, her inheritance, and the quiet confidence that comes from surviving betrayal without becoming the person who betrayed you. On the night after the opening, Ava stood alone in the front doorway of Ruth's house, looking out at the street with a glass of lemonade in her hand. The sky was deep and soft and impossible to own. The porch light glowed over the steps. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed with music low in the windows. Ava smiled, not because everything had been easy, but because the worst of it had finally stopped echoing. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she opened it. It was from Harper. Just 5 words. You were right. I'm sorry. Ava read it once. Then she looked back into the warm light of the house her grandmother had trusted her to keep standing. And for the first time in a very long time, she let herself believe that justice does not always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of patience, proof, and the kind of truth that outlasts a lie. And sometimes the person who tried to ruin you ends up humiliated by nothing more dramatic than the mirror they were forced to face. Ava set the phone down, finished her lemonade, and closed the front door behind her, not as an ending, as a beginning.